Hi all, on Play Chess and streaming to YouTube. Okay, I thought for this week's radio show we could have a look at the Zurich Chess Challenge. This is in Switzerland, and the Zurich Chess Challenge has got an interesting time control, which I wouldn't personally classify as new classical, more than I would prefer to call it rapid chess. It seems to be like rapid chess quality. I think there's a trade-off in chess. If you give the super grandmasters more time, they can be more creative and interesting, and because they can use the time on the clock to find exceptions to the rules, the tiny finesses of positions, etc. But I guess there's this argument to make chess more of a spectator sport, while these games are being played to be spectator friendly, for like live streaming. But the thing is, yeah, it's, for me, this is like a rapid chess tournament, and I think FIDE have classified it anyway as rapid games. I'm not looking at the Blitz games this week. We might look at them next week. So the time control here is 40 minutes for each player with a 10-second increment, I believe. Let's have a look at some of the more interesting games from this. So the first one I'd like to have a look at is Shirov against Nakamura. They're both really exciting players. Let's take Black's perspective. Okay, so Shirov against Nakamura. This was played on the 13th, just 3 days ago of February, from this day today, 13th of February 2016. So very aggressive, exciting players. But Shirov's not in the 2700 club at the moment. He's 2684. Nakamura's 2787. So let's see what happens. E4 from Alexei Shirov. His book Fire on Board is highly recommendable, by the way. I've got that. It's, if you want to get an insight into an amazing, dynamic, aggressive player, then Shirov, like Nakamura, they have that similar trait. Very aggressive, dynamic players. So Nakamura played the French defense. A little bit of a surprise here. We see D4, D5, E5, the advanced variation is chosen by Shirov. So we see C5, C3. This is all pretty standard stuff. Let's put on a Kibitzer actually here, just in case there's some interesting tactics to check out more easily. So this is main line, knight C6, knight F3. Quite often this is Erva's waiting move. Max Erva played this waiting move, bishop D7, which is highly popular. But it seems in live book Queen B6 is the preferred choice. The number one choice is Queen B6 throughout the history of time. Anyway, so that's the slightly more popular Queen B6, putting more pressure logically on D4 here. And White now wants to cut out this bishop B4 check quite often, if Black's playing here, because that could be quite dangerous, a check on the diagonal. And we see this move dual purpose actually, not just stopping a potential bishop b4 check, but White can actually try and get Black to release this tension on the centre with b4 later. And Black has often played here either c4 or knight h6. These are the two main moves. So c4 means that b4 we can take en passant. We're sealing that b3 square. That's quite popular. But we see in this game knight h6, another interesting idea. Black doesn't worry about the double pawns here. If the bishop can fianchetto like this, it can exert pressure on the centre later, especially if you imagine castling an f6. We see b4, so White is pursuing this to get Black to release the central tension from the position. We see c takes d4, and now actually bishop takes h6 is played here. And this is actually a rare move. From a live book perspective, this doesn't usually happen. Over 700 games are with c takes d4. For example, the knight is permitted to come to f5, and it looks like this is surely quite good for Black, this pressure, but this is a well-trodden course. This sort of thing has happened a lot before. There's even over 120 games here, this position. In fact, this position, I think, is similar to something presented on Reddit well, a similar sort of position, but g4 is very logical, it seems, to just just kick that knight at the expense of potentially creating weaknesses, but the important thing is to relieve the pressure on d4, and white should be okay here. This sort of thing, it's quite common. So that's a completely different path to this game, and that seems to be the main path, not to actually take on h6. But this is what Shirov chose. He took on h6. Why would he do this? Isn't it quite dynamic for black after this? We see g takes h6, c takes d4, bishop d7. Yeah, so if you've joined the game late, it's just to remind those that joined late, it's Alexei Shirov playing white against Hikaru Nakamura playing black. So Nakamura has played a French defense. We see here an interesting move. Now, instead of this sort of bog standard looking move bishop e2, we see actually rook a2, which introduces some interesting possibilities. Maybe the rook's going to come here, for example, later. We see rook g8, putting pressure on the king side. And actually there's a threat here which needs to be potentially addressed, which is, I don't know if any of you want us to know about this. Well, no, I'm going to tell you. The threat is rook g4 to put pressure on d4, and it seems, yeah, white's next move looks curious, but it's the do of that to stop, I believe it's to stop rook g4 here, because there'll be a lot of pressure on d4. Okay, so black plays h5, and now g3. So as if the bishop's going to fianchetto here, h4 is played. So trying to get the knight away from protecting d4 here, to try and dislodge the knight. But g4, we see bishop e7, bishop e2. Now black obviously has the bishop here, and on general like principles, if you try and open up the position, rip open the center, the bishops are sometimes good, but the French defense players have to be aware that anytime you play f6, you know, e6 could be weak, this diagonal could be weak, there could be a host of issues. But in this particular position, it seems f6 is safe enough, and it is played to try and open up the position. So black's got the extra, like the two bishops, to try and liberate as well. We see b5, trying to take black's control of d4 away a bit. The knight goes back to d8. Queen d3, as if queen takes h7 is on the cards. Well, that has to be addressed here. It seems this is too dangerous to leave. What else is black going to do anyway? On f takes, this I think is, instead of queen takes h7, actually there's even stronger, just to take on at e5. This is pleasant enough for white, this position, to have a knight on e5. So black actually is in no rush here to play f takes e. Nakamura plays rook g7. So to take is a mistake. You know, if black plays this, then he's improving white. If white takes that, then he's improving black. You know, bishop coming here. So they both don't want to encourage the opponent's pieces to be more aggressive than they need to be, or help them along in any way. So we see knight c3 in this position. And now a bit more pressure is actually placed on e5 with knight f7. White castles. Yeah, and it looks as though, isn't this a little bit airy, this position here? So this seems like a very logical idea, h5, try and open up the white king. And black, technically, from the Fritz point of view, is already doing very well. Black has a clear advantage here. Does anyone disagree? If I ask you a quick poll here, who do you think has won the? Who do you think is better, white or black? So I might have biased it already with some comments, but I'll give you 20 seconds to think about the position anyway. Just take stock. The opening situation here. Who do you think is actually better? I mean, maybe you think white's better, maybe because the c-file, it looks as though the c-file, for example, and the c5 square, these could be issues, right? Just to balance things out. So do you think white or black? Because you have got a potential c5 square. It's not all downsides, just because the king looks a little bit scary. Okay, from an engine point of view, anyway, the engine seems to favour black here, but it's only Fritz. I don't know what other engines think, but yeah, okay. Let's see what happens. So, is White's queenside advantage going to out-trump Black's pressure here? We see a tempo gain on the queen. Anyway, ignoring this for the moment, hitting the queen. The queen goes back. So Black here seems crouched. Like a tiger or something, ready to pounce, because look at all the pieces. They're actually, the pieces haven't left the second rank, whilst White's pieces, well, there's one there and there's one there on the third and fourth, well, two on the third, but Black's pieces are just ready to hope, to open the position maybe for the bishop here. Now finally here, White, he doesn't really want to defend g4, it seems. White actually took on f6 in this position. If you might think g4, if we try and defend g4, I don't think this really helps, because anyway the centre's collapsing. For example, f takes e5. Yeah, I mean that's just a hopeless idea to defend g4. How would you defend g4 here? It's not on the cards here. So we see e takes f6, bishop takes f6, and now we see actually in this position knight c5. Yeah, and this does seem as though isn't White's king safety a bit suspect? Well, we see h takes g. Now here, okay, you might think rook takes g4 check. Actually b6 was played. Let's have a look. If rook takes g4 here, this is okay, it seems, for Black. I mean, there doesn't seem to be anything terrible happening here, but White can take on b7, and it seems this position is going to be okay for White. Nearly, it's going to be okay. So b6 protects the pawn and kicks the knight at the same time, so why not do that? b6. Well, it gives White time though. Knight takes d7, queen takes d7. And now getting out of the way of the g file, we see king h1. And here, I think rook takes g4 might be a little bit dodgy. Let's just check it out. In the game, Nakamura played rook c8. If rook takes g4, this is bad. This is bad actually, because knight e5 hits the rook and the queen. And you might think, well, we can defend the rook with knight takes e5, but then we've still got two pieces hit. And if we do this, well, we just lost the piece. No, so that's no good. This position is no, there's no way out of this position. So yeah, taking the pawn is a trap to avoid here. We see rook c8, in this position instead. Rook c2. Okay, rook takes c2, queen takes c2. And now again, I mean, I think the same conditions hold really. Rook takes g4, I believe. Knight e5 is still a handy move here. Although Black could consider something like this, exchange sack. But it's not entirely clear. Engine likes White here because of things like queen g6. No, so Black's more cautious. He plays knight d6, re-centralizing the knight. We see knight e5 now. Bishop takes e5, d takes. Knight e4, and this looks like a very dangerous centralized knight now, with good pressure on the king side. King g2. Now knight c5, which means actually that d4 becomes possible, and d3 then would be a threat. So the knight's got out of the way of the e4 square to make way for d4 here. d4 also means things like queen d5 check could be handy. And if over bishop f3, then we've got rook takes g4. So pushing the d pawn seems like an attractive idea. We see rook h1. Now, you might think, having said what I've just said, why isn't d4 played here? Well, rook h1 does attack the pawn, and that is actually defended instead of trying for something like this. I'm not sure there's enough time to try for something like that. Let's just check it out. Instead of defending the pawn, say we did d4. It's a sharp position actually. Rook takes h4. d3 is actually good here, of course. Now say, okay, instead bishop f3, this position. That would stop queen d5 anyway. So this is yeah, black might be defending this anyway, like that. Okay, so anyway, we see queen e7, nothing to be excited about basically because of bishop f3. So queen e7, queen c1, and it looks as though here, interesting, that well, queen e3 could be a good centralizing move, or queen h6 could be a good invasive move. We see rook h7 at least stopping queen h6. Queen e3 now, so centralizing and supporting e5, and keeping an eye on g5. Queen g7, rook c1, and it's interesting here, rook c1, because there's an eye on potentially an exchange sack to try and get a 2-to-1 pawn majority. You might think the bishop could then be handy. So it looks as though an exchange sack idea is there's a seeds of an exchange sack idea. Queen f8, and we see a4, as if there's some preparation being made for these pawns to get a bit further before an exchange sack. In this position, black played rook f7. If knight, well, then there's a disaster check, just winning the queen. The knight can't move here because of the check there. So we see rook f7, and with this it seems rook f4 could be interesting, coming in with rook f4. We see f3, and rook f4 is played now, and this is actually really quite dangerous because actually black has created a threat with this rook f4 move. White's no longer controlling the h6 square. This is an important thing actually. It's blocked white's access to h6, which actually creates then a potential threat of queen h6 for black, which needs to be parried potentially in some situations. Now here though, white, he was set up for this exchange sack on c5. It seems, there might be some other ideas for black, like just simply taking on a4 as well. So white, Shirov here played a very interesting move based on this exchange sack. He did it here. Rook takes c5, and his pawns are ready to roll, it seems, with a5 now. a5. Interestingly though, black, yeah, if white's given a few more moves, then b6 starts to look a little bit dangerous. Or does it? Maybe black can take in and rook b4. It might not be the soundest exchange sack in the world, to be honest, but we come again to this idea that this is like rapid chess. It shouldn't be taken too seriously. The players haven't got amazing time resources to play with to think about moves. So it looks like this exchange sack is at least worth a try. And black here played now h3 check, and this is actually a really tricky move, this position here. You might think, well, there's a few options for white. White actually played king g3. If he plays king h2, what's the problem with this? Well, black might have actually things like rook b4. That could be annoying, with ideas of maybe queen f4 later. So perhaps this explains why white wanted to kind of gain a tempo with king g3, because it's actually threatening, not in this position, because there's always h2 queening, right? But it could be handy, this pressure on f4. So I guess, you know, that looks to be with good reason to play king g3. But yes, after king g3, there's actually quite a nifty move that black plays. I mean, the past pawn majority is not. It seems as though it also could be stopped with rook b4, to be fair. But there's a really nifty move that Nakamura plays here, really powerful, and it's the strongest move in the position, it seems. Can you guess? So black to play, and I'll give you like 20 seconds to guess, what did Nakamura play in this position? So I'll get rid of these arrows. Whoops, if I can. I'm having trouble getting rid of the arrows. Okay, let's get rid of the colours. Alright, black to play. What would you play in this position? Okay. Yeah, it seems okay. One thing, I'll tell you something funny, which might not be that educational, or it might be. I don't know. It might find. But I mean, watching my dad actually play a lot of backgammon recently, and I'm sure this online backgammon site is frigged. If it wants a player to lose, you leave loose pieces, loose counters, and the opponent gets the right dice, and your loose pieces get hit. Now in chess, yeah, if your opponent's like really strong, it seems that, you know, they'll find a way to exploit loose pieces. So Nakamura is obviously really strong, and there's a loose piece actually on e3. And although it seems unimaginable how this queen could be victimized on e3, but the thing is, it exists. The issue exists, but how cunning and resourceful you are to exploit the issue is a separate thing. But Nakamura's move does exploit, it seems, the loose queen on e3 basically. If that queen was like supported by a pawn, this wouldn't be like an issue. But it is exploited with the move h2. And this is really quite clever. And I think I've used the same tactic in some blitz and bullets quite frequently actually as well. The same sort of idea. That white can't take here now, and he has to stop the pawn queening, and white actually resigns here. This is because king takes h2, we have this killer check, and now the queen is a target all of a sudden. That loose piece is a target, and it doesn't matter where the king goes. If king g2, rook takes g4 would check, and if the king then tries to protect the queen, then we can actually technically mate white in 3, or we could win the queen. The mate in 3 is with check, check, and mate. But if we just wanted to win the queen in a similar position, there's like rook g2 check as well, just taking the king away from the queen. So that loose piece is exploited there. Yeah, and so you know, that's how the game kind of ends. Yeah, with h2, but it wasn't played out. Now, if we look at other defenses here, black can force that scenario with check, get the king there, play this check here, and we got the same scenario of winning the queen. It's quite nifty, but it's on e3, so the queen is lost. I mean, yeah. H2 seems to win. There's no other defenses, so it seems black's passed pawn was more of an annoyance ever than these would be immediately, just winning the game here. So yeah, this is like a rapid game. What was interesting about it is the French defense by Nakamura, and the bishop takes h6 variation isn't as popular anyway, as I mentioned. I think basically it does give black the bishop pair, which is dangerous in itself. I think the timing or not taking on g4 was very, very interesting and useful to know. Instead trying to build up pressure in other ways. So that was an interesting game for the rapid time control. I hope you got something from that game. I thought it was quite interesting. I intend to have a look at some other decisive games now for the event. Did anyone get anything from this game? It was interesting, at least as rapid time controls go. I hope you consider that anyway. So we'll have a look at the decisive games in particular. So remember, 40 minutes with 10-second increments. Now another game of interest from Nakamura's perspective, especially, well, it's Aronian against Nakamura. Let's have a look at this. Okay, Aronian against Nakamura, the 15th of February 2016, which was yesterday. So what happened yesterday? D4, Aronian played D4. Aronian's actually higher rated, it seems, 2792, so Nakamura 2787. So D4, D5, we have C4, E6. We go into Queen's Gambit declined territory with Bishop F4. Yeah, this is quite trendy recently. It's been in a number of games, this line. C5 is played, C6, H3, B6, trying to undermine the pawn chain. This looks fairly standard stuff. This is the main kind of line actually. A5, this has all been played before, this position. Okay, now here there's some different moves. There's Bishop A6, that's quite popular, or Bishop B7. In the game actually H6 is played. We see Bishop D3. And now Bishop A6. So black has waited for Bishop D3 to try and swap off here. White castles, Bishop takes D3, Queen takes D3. So black at least has got rid of that potentially bad bishop. So the pawn chain is all on light squares here. Queen C8. Rook FC1. Now clearly white seems visually to be doing something aggressive on the queen side. For example, like B5 would seem attractive, just with that queen as a target potentially on the C file. Queen gets out of the way here with Queen B7. We see Rook AB1. Now black plays A takes, and Rook FC8. So Nakamura playing black Rook FC8. Now white plays Knight D2. So where is the knight going? Maybe the knight wants C5 later. Maybe, you know, C takes B could be on the cards potentially, or just supporting E4 is another plan. Maybe that's more relevant in this position. Just play E4. We see Bishop D8, Knight B3. So the knight is holding these squares and potentially ready to pounce on C5 or A5. Bishop C7, trying to trade off this bishop. White does take there. Queen takes. Rook A1. So yeah, white's got, it seems, a certain amount of pressure and a space advantage on the queen side. We see queen going to B7 here. And now B5. It seems as though that should be interesting, B5. But sometimes trying to exploit a space advantage creates a trade-off between creating weaknesses or a potential of a passed pawn here. But here it depends really on the exact details of the position. Is B5 really favourable to play here? Well, let's see. Rook takes A1, Rook takes A1, B takes C5, which does mean Knight A5 is with a tempo gain. What else is white doing though? If he plays something like, white didn't play D takes, he played actually Knight A5 here, which seems logical. If he plays D takes, it seems, you know, C takes B5, we've got this weakness here to pick on. This is just a weakness. If knight takes, it's not really that clever off the knight takes. Don't think white's actually getting anywhere in this line. Just lost the pawn basically. So the idea was knight a5. That's the idea. And yeah, taking on c6 would be desirable. So we see this pin on the knight against the rook. So knight takes c6 is ruled out. Now, is b takes ruled out? White actually played this, attacking the queen. If b takes, black could actually play rook takes c6 using that pin. This is okay for black. So we see knight b3, queen b7. And are we going to repeat? They do repeat this. But here, instead of queen going back to b7, Nakamura actually played queen b8. I think there was actually high stakes for this game for Nakamura to try and win the entire event. This blitz game, if he could win it with black, he would win the entire event. This is a key game actually from that perspective, because he was tied with Vichy Anand. So there was two events. This is like the rapid event, and there was a blitz event. So they're closely like matched on points. So Nakamura had to try and win this to win the kind of tiebreak with Vichy Anand. So he's broken out of the repetition with queen b8. So we see d takes c5. Okay, but now c takes b5. And surely the c5 pawn is weak. But what else could white have done here? If he takes here, in this position, c4 might be the strongest, might even be stronger than queen takes b3. Then taking here, this position is good for black. Yeah, this is dangerous. This is dangerous. Black seems to be doing very well here. A pawn up. Okay, so we see d takes c5, c takes b5 again. The whole b5 concept, although it looked like a good idea, doesn't seem like a good idea now, actually, because white has, it seems, weak pawns to attack. Queen d4 holding c5, but now b4, we see knight a4, and b4 means queen b5 is facilitated actually now. And in fact, black now threatens rook a8 with some pressure here. Queen b2. And now black's pieces are actually getting to be quite lively in this position. Knight e4. So the knight's quite aggressive here. And now we see it's also hitting this poor c5 pawn. Everything's like hitting c5. And there's only two protecting. We see f3. That's taken. Yeah, it seems white's crumbling here. Yeah, white is basically two pawns down now. Rook c1, but he has got this pin. It seems. Is this a dangerous pin? Rook c7 means that knight a6 will be protecting the rook to break out of this pin. Also knight d3, because it's without any check when it was on c8. So knight d3 hitting the queen is also on the cards. Queen e5. Now in this position actually, knight a6 might be plausible for a technical reason, but it's an inhuman move. You really wouldn't want to play like this with this idea. This is a computer defense, but apparently it's okay for black. No, basically queen b6, just defending the rook and keeping everything defended. f4, and now knight a6 is possible with, well, as well, clearly defending c7. Rook a1 with the threat of rook takes a6 and queen takes c7. So rook c3 gets out of that. Knight d4. Yeah, black is two pawns up. It seems white's running out of compensation rapidly. Knight c7 protects even a8 here. There's not even a check. We see Also, the queen is about to be trapped in this position with f6 if black's not careful, because the knight also is protecting e6, which means f6 actually traps the queen without any check here on e6. And unfortunately, white's next move really probably didn't address that very well. Maybe f5 was a way of addressing that, but rook b1 was played instead, and f6. Sorry, I'm talking nonsense. I'm talking absolute nonsense. The queen's got h5. Sorry. Hold on a sec. Pardon me. f6 is not a threat as in trapping the queen, but the queen would have to go to h5 and then drop e3. That's the problem. That's the problem. It's not about trapping the queen. It's about e3 here. So we see rook b1, which doesn't address the f6 threat. Now f5, I mean, this is a difficult position for white in any case. He's 2 pawns down. He's crumbling, basically. He's going to be 3 pawns down now. And this is the end of the game. Rook takes e3. White's 3 pawns down. He's been completely munched. And there's not even a check here because the knight holds e8. There doesn't seem to be any compensation. In fact, the black queen is ideally placed on the king here. This knight's attacked. It's a disaster. It's all falling to bits. So what seemed to be an attractive position out of the opening, if you remember from that b5, it seemed attractive, just created a load of weaknesses and all the pawns seemed to be mopped up. Yeah, it didn't work out very well. This on move 21 b5, it became a horror story after b5. Basically pawn after pawn started becoming weak. So sometimes, yeah, in chess, although visually you might have a space advantage, and visually there might be some seemingly logical, thematic looking move, but in practice, if it might not work out as you dreamed it. Yeah, it really depends on the position. All right, so let's have a look at some other games. So that was a key game though for Nakamura to win with black. So I don't know if there's any interesting point to take out of this game. Be careful when trying to exploit a space advantage. Is that one point? Does anyone else have any points to add? And I could mention them. But I think because it's rapid, you've got to be cautious looking at these games for instructive value as well. It is basically a rapid chess game, so you'd expect less creativity and more blunders. Or rather, I think Magnus Carlsen has argued that when you're drunk, you actually have less time. Sometimes you have more creativity, but the accuracy goes. So actually, what the trade-off is actually more blunders. It's not about creativity. I think it's just basically more blunders. Yeah, I think that's the key trade-off. So maybe the creativity is there in some games. So let's have a look at some Vishy Anand games. So he won some nice games in this event. So his game against Levon Aronian, how did that go? Don't worry, this isn't such a long game. Okay, I'll tell you in advance. So e4 from Vishy Anand. Now this was played on the 13th of February, so 3 days ago. So e5 from Levon Aronian. We see knight f3, knight c6, and we get into a 4 knights variation because there's 4 knights here. It's very excitingly called the 4 knights variation with bishop b5. Yes, there's a bishop on b5 as well. Now apparently, yeah, this looks like a strange move, but it's been played quite a bit. Bishop d6. The more boring move is just to keep the symmetry going with bishop b4. So black is just imitating white. The symmetry line, I've seen someone draw with Nigel Short in a symbol with black with this line. So it could go like this. It carries on quite symmetrically until here. And play can like carry on like that. So that's an interesting line to consider, just bishop b4. But bishop d6 has been played before. It looks awkward because it's like kind of blocking in pieces, but it holds the e5 pawn. Now white often plays either d3 or castles. Castles are seen in this game. Black castled. Now d3. Rook e8. A3. which gives a pigeonhole potentially for that bishop if it ever wanted to come there if it was harassed. H6. Now the bishop actually goes there to c4, bishop c5. Bishop e3. And here there's been a couple of major games in line, but it seems with bishop b6, which is, I think, something to be considered here. Because taking on e3, I think it's dangerous to give, in principle, your opponent's dynamic play, especially on faster time controls. The more dynamic play you give opponents, the more you've got to be concerned and trying to play defensive moves later. And I think this surprised people that bishop b6 wasn't played, just keeping that tension. Instead, we see bishop takes e3. And attacking players, I think, would relish white's position here, because the pawn actually, although it's double pawns, it helps control key squares, the center square, and the rook, obviously this f-fold seems dangerous. So already this looks like a dangerous position for white, but don't let me bias you. Let's take a quick poll here. Who do you think, who is better, white or black? I mean, you might favor structure, and you might think black's better because black's better structurally, right? Could you argue the case black's better structurally? But the dynamic aspects of the position, the trade-off, the dynamic aspect of the position, surely you can't argue it favours white here. And there's also potentially some coordination on f7 going to be in some lines. So what do you think about this position? Do you think it's favouring white or black? But don't let these arrows bias you. Unfortunately, instead of removing them, I'm multiplying the arrows here of bias. I'm going to try and remove them. Nope, I can't remove them. If I click somewhere else, no? Okay. So who do you think is better here, white or black? Oh, okay, most of you voting white. Yeah? Yeah, okay. Now, if you did think black's better because of the pawn structure, well, you know, you should look at some Botvinnik games. He's often accepted horrible looking pawns for dynamic piece play, and he was world champion for a very long time. So he must have, even the classical iron grip positional players, they value their pieces, yeah. And you might think, well, the pawns, the positional players like the pawn structure, but the dynamic aspects of the position are really important here. So d6. And we see actually after d6, this is already a dangerous position because of the f7 coordination, and in fact it means white is able to play a very dangerous move here, knight h4, because black cannot exploit this loose piece in this position. If he tries something like this, it's a disaster. If he tries like this, we have bishop takes f7 check. So that knight's pinned at the moment. So the knight's just coming to f5 kind of leisurely. We see bishop e6. And is white worried again about these double pawns? No. He just puts the knight on f5. And Levon Aronian, he plays bishop takes c4. And the double pawns here, you can make the case, well, it's fragmented, right? And these are double pawns. Again, key squares are held. And there's an iron grip on d5. So this position, even though white is again structurally compromised, it seems further, dynamically black is in a bind here on d5, and if white can just put pressure on the king side easily, this is scary now. We see in this position king h7, and white is just ramping up the pressure now with queen f3. So these are all pressure points for the knight, and also the defensive knight can also be challenged potentially with knight d5. Not only that, white might have dynamic play with c5 at some point as well, or even c5 before rook d1. So it's a very scary position. The knight is putting pressure on d6 as well. We see here an interesting move indeed. We see the move knight b8, And yeah, there are some commentators who indicate did Aronian go drinking a lot the night before this game? This is not. I have to say, this is not one of Aronian's greatest ever games. It seems as though his captures have given White a fantastically aggressive, dynamic game here, and this knight retreat doesn't seem as elegant as in the Brer variation of the Roy Lopez in this particular position, because White does seem to have an aggressive initiative on the king side already. In fact, White celebrates his aggressive pressure on the king side here. So White's play in this position. What would you play in this position? Okay, it seems, Levon has set himself up as a punching bag in this game, in boxing terms, rather than an opponent. So let's see, how can White hit the black king side? Knight takes h6 was played. So clearly this is not very nice for black because of this f-file pressure, reaping some dividends here. If g takes, then queen takes. This is not a nice position for black, because White's just going to double rooks and do all sorts of horrible stuff here. For example, this position, I think there's pressure on c7 here as well. If we try and defend, this can just get worse, because the knight's actually defending this one, so this one's going to come here, and it's going to be horrible. This is like virtually a forced loss, this whole line here. Things like knight f6, check on the cards, and etc. So that's virtually just resigning to play g takes h6. It's like resigning. But so is the other move, king takes h6. And there's not much else to do in this position. If the king moves back, knight takes actually forks king and queen. Yeah, it's a dynamic disaster. It's a dynamic disaster, this position. After knight b8, knight takes h6. So king takes h6. We see check, and the game's not going to last too long now. You might think, well, hang on, is the defensive move? Not really. G4 at minimum is good here, it seems, because G6 we don't have to take here, because it might give black something to play with. Now in the game, knight h5 wasn't played. In fact, king g6. I'm just to quickly explore knight h5. Though the strongest, apparently, well, it's a toss-up between g4 and knight d5. Actually, we can follow this because we get knight d5 here, and we've got horrible nasties happening. We might as well just look at the game. In fact, it's bad for black. King g6. We see a very good attacking move in this position. Natural rook lift, I'm not going to ask you, just a rook lift does threaten, it seems, a mate in 3 or 4, either with queen f5 check or rook g3 check. Black tries knight h5, which does indeed parry rook g3 check. And you might think, hold on a sec, isn't that really clever? Because also, if White plays queen f5 check, there's king h6, right? Yeah, this could be a bit murkier than the game continuation, which was stronger than queen f5 check. So it's a good move. Actually, I'll ask you about this move here. What would you play here? White to play with the attack. White to play. So I'm giving you a clue. It might not be queen f5 check. So what would you play here? Would you be really sad that rook g3 check is not possible? What would you play here? Okay, yeah, rook f5. Well done if you thought rook f5. Rook f5. Which immediately threatens queen takes h5 mate. So there's some urgency for black. The knight retreats. But now a great move, which actually forces a mate in 2, technically, is played in this position. So a nice technical attacking move. So I'll call this a technical attacking move, which forces a mate in 2. White to play here. We're in the realms of just tactical solutions now. I mean, the position can be won in many different ways, but what's the quickest way? And this ended the game. So this is on move 19. This ended the game on move 19. So this game is technically a miniature. So there's a move here which forces a mate in 2. I'll show you. It's apparently, well, it's easy. I've got engine view on this. This forces a mate in 2. It's a mate next move. Whatever black does, it's mate next move here. Black resigned. Example, knight h7, there's checkmate. Knight takes e4, there's checkmate. I'm just running through some ideas. On candidate moves, knight c6, there's checkmate here, rook g5 check, mate. Yeah, the queen h4 not only guards the exit squares, but as a bonus is supporting more checks with rook g5. So it's keeping a view on the exit squares of the king, and it's creating more checking possibilities and coordination possibilities for checks. So queen at h4 is a crunching move, which there's no defense. If knight g8, queen h5, checkmate. If rook h8, rook g5, checkmate. Because we can keep the queen here guarding the exit square. Yeah. Not, by the way, check here, because then black king escapes, and in fact black might actually be okay there. No, we want to checkmate the black king here. Rook g5. Oh, there's nothing. It's checkmate next move. Yeah, it's funny that, isn't it? Oh, so knight takes here. Yeah, we've seen that actually protects the rook as well and everything. Okay, so yeah, it's a tragic game, and it did make me think about the time controls for the tournament, because you get these games which do seem like more superficial and shallow than the normal classical games, and it's true. This is like just a rapid time control basically. This is a rapid time control game, complete disaster for black. But he didn't play very well, I think. No, definitely. Black didn't play in a very creative, inspiring way. He just seemed to give white the dynamic, aggressive play, which is more dangerous, I think, the quicker the time control. So let's have a look at another game. Yeah, that was pretty disastrous. Shortest game of the tournament. I think shortest win of the tournament, this game. As far as I'm aware, 19 moves, so disaster there. Let's have a look now at Giri against Vichy Anand. So this occurred on the 13th of February. February. So Giri 2798, Vichy Anand 2784. Oh, pardon me. Sorry, e4, e5. So Giri plays, instead of Roy Lopez, he plays bishop c4. So we get into Gyoko piano territory. And in fact, it becomes even quieter with Gyoko pianissimo. I can't say it. Gyoko pianissimo, even quieter than Gyoko piano. All right, so d3. Okay, d3, d6, c3, a6, giving the bishop retreat. a4, black castles, rook e1. It seems fairly standard stuff. In fact, from a live book perspective, we've gone out of live book somehow. Let's just check this out. Here there were 10 games with bishop a7. Where did we head out of live book? Now, just for my own interests, pardon me. This position is extremely well trodden. Where did we go out of live book? A6 is well trodden. Usually white plays here, bishop b3 apparently. We're talking over 800 games, bishop b3. This is very rare to see a4 here. And just because it's a rare departure a4, let's just check. Bishop b3, games usually run like this. Apparently this is a popular continuation. And it should be okay for both sides, but black's use of the f4 square seems something quite logical as well. Okay, so usually bishop b3 is the move, so this is quite rare. 36 games only. We're going to rare territory here, and there's only 10 games of bishop a7. This is even rarer now. It goes out of live book. We're kind of out of live book, even though it looks as though this position should be quite common. It's not actually, it seems. Bishop e6. And this is strange, actually. It reminds me of the game we've just seen where Anand was white and smashed out 11 Aronian. The thing is with a4, it doesn't make much, it makes less sense with a4 to try and retreat the bishop. If we try and retreat the bishop, black actually can just play now d5. And black surely is doing fantastically well here. For example, this position is just too aggressive for black. Black might even have bishop takes f2 check here. This position is just too aggressive for black. This is impossible because of check. So yeah, it doesn't make too much sense to retreat the bishop actually. And a2 is probably even worse. We can just take there and then d5. Even worse. Black would be totally more than equal. So white actually took on e6. Sort of parallel to the other game we've just seen. Black's getting this nice potential f-file pressure. It has some similarities. There's coordination between the rook and bishop on f2. Yeah, it seems strange coincidence to me, at least, that this game has that correlation with the Aronian game. So we see bishop e3. Bishop takes e3. Okay, but black doesn't seem to have that much pressure, right, on this f file, does he? Queen d7. Okay, queen f7. g3. We see knight d7. King g2. a5, fixing down the a4 pawn. And now knight c5. Some positional play here. Queen d7. Knight e7. Now after knight c4, in fact b5, black is actually switching his attention to this structure, this pawn structure. Queen takes b5. So black's got some pressure, it seems, on the queen side. Knight c6. Puts more pressure on the poor b pawn. d4. That's taken. Knight takes. Yeah, white's structure is a bit compromised here. And there's a nice square, it seems, on b4 here, potentially. Queen b6. Oh, sorry. Queen b6. The knight plonks itself on b4. Okay, protecting e6 here. Okay, so yeah, quite an interlude on the queen side. But now with this pressure here, we see rook f7, which is dual purpose, not only defending, but potentially we can put pressure on the f file, it seems. And in fact, that's what happens there after knight d2. Put some pressure finally on the f file. There's actually a threat emerged. Rook takes f2 check. And okay, so can white easily do something about this? What does he want to do here? He played what seems to be quite a weakening move. Maybe rook f1 is a way of just defending f2 kind of safely. From the engine point of view, this is about equal, in fact. Even though d5 is supported by the knight, this looks as though it should be good for black. This apparently is okay. It's okay for white. But in the game, we get to see a shaky looking move, f4. I say that because pawns don't go backwards, and it can be challenged with e5, and these rooks will still be dangerous on the f file. So e5 is played now. And you might think, well, hang on, the rook's pinned. Is this really bad for white? Knight f3. We see e takes f4, and now an unpinning with d5. So the queen is no longer pinning the rook. And here now, d6 check would be annoying. If rook takes f4, then d6 check is annoying, yeah? Because then we'd have d takes c7. So safety point, block the d pawn first, so we can hit this pawn hard. Queen d6 is played, blocking the d pawn. So the threat now is, well, there's two actually. Knight takes d, at least two. Queen takes f4. Those two. We've got to keep c7 defended. Actually, that's an issue. Got to keep c7 defended. So we see knight e5 here, but here rook takes f4 is played in this position. And you might think, oh, hold on a sec, is this pawn hanging here? Apparently not. It's a dangerous position for white. In this position, king g1 was played. But yeah, the parallels with the Aronian game are kind of interesting. That black's dynamic f file pressure looks really dangerous. White again has got a compromised king safety. So yeah, it seems black's got really aggressive dynamic play again against white's king here. If queen takes c7, what is the disaster? Well, the rook is committed to protecting the queen, so I think the tacticians among you should see if we can just get the rook away from the queen somehow, we're going to win that queen. For example, check. We can just play rook f1 check here. So there's no rook takes because we can take the queen, yeah? And if here we can play this check. And then this position is horrible for white. For example, queen takes. There's going to be nasty things here happening. So that's not really possible for white to take that pawn. It will be a tactical liability taking that pawn. So we see this move king g1. King h7 is played here. Rook g3, as though that's defending and attacking. It's defending some squares, it seems. Rook comes here, threatening actually. Rook takes because there's a pin here and there's also a check here. So rook takes e5 is on the cards in this position. For example, just to give a token move, takes, we play the check and we're winning the queen next. So that is the threat that needs to be addressed. So white addresses that with rook g4. But now this trebling, queen f6. This is really dangerous. This is an Alekhine's gun pointed at f1 potentially. But at the moment, the queen and rook are defending f1. White takes on f4. Rook takes f4. But now there's things like queen g5 check coming, which look really dangerous. Are really dangerous. Rook f1. Check. Now black doesn't want to get rid of his attacking pressure. He doesn't want to take on f1. That would be a major mistake. Surely. Taking on f1 is pretty harmless, I think, in compared to what can be done here. Rook e4. So this threatens things like queen d2 check, principally. Knight f3 defends d2 and hits the queen. We see the check though. And now rook e3, and things are getting nasty now because rook e3 means that knight d3 is coming soon. With ideas like taking and then knight e1 check. So the knight coming to d3 will be unpleasant, to say the least. We see white playing queen c1 here, but this is really crushing now. This is just loses instantly, basically queen c1. There's not much to do here defensively, it seems. It seems white's roasted in any case. But this, after check here, yeah, black just plays queen g3, so threatening all sorts of things which white can't really defend against at all. Yeah, if here, then we just take here and then knight mates. So that there's no defense here after queen g3. White's king safety has been completely compromised, like in the Aronian game. Engine's giving this chat. I don't really think that does anything. Oh no, no, it's engine stuff to delay the mates. Doesn't really do anything. Yeah, no, this is pretty terminal, as you might think. Yeah, so queen g3, and that was the end of that. Theoretically, probably there's a reason why a4 isn't popular as bishop b3. Vichy Anand seemed to play again in this game very aggressively, dynamically, and not worried too much about Matu, but rather about king safety. And he really did expose white's king safety, or lack of king safety. So I don't know what you guys got from that game. Did you get anything from that game? Did anyone get anything? It seems that, you know, you don't have to worry about the double pawns in the center. From these two games, I think we can see having double pawns in the center is one of the least bad versions of having double pawns, because you can sometimes get f-file pressure on the opponent's king, as we see in both these examples, this game and the previous game. Okay, so I was Giri against Anand. Let's have a look now at Kramnik, one of Kramnik's more interesting. Share it around a bit today. One of Kramnik's interesting games against Giri. Okay, so Vladimir Kramnik was playing white against Giri. This was on the 14th, 2 days ago, and the game went like this. So went as this. Okay, this was the game. Knight f3 d5. We see a king's engine attack, or a reti opening to start off with. Now, in fact, the king's engine attack is strictly like a king's engine like this. It's not like that. In fact, white here plays d4, which technically might actually be stronger, just marking out the key dark squares. Okay, so we go into... Apparently this is classified as a reti opening, New York and Capablanca systems. So b3 now from Vladimir, and we have this tight grip on the e5 square, and black seems like fairly solid and sensible play here as well for the moment. Here quite often actually it seems e3 has been played. There's like over 40 games of e3 in this position. But we see a rarer move, c takes d5. Just for those theoretically interested, e3, the games continue sometimes like this, blah blah blah. So, but no, we see in this game, we see c takes d5, knight takes, bishop takes, c takes, and now knight e5. So white's got some sort of pressure surely out of the opening, or has he? Knight c6, queen d2, a4. In fact, the engines at this, well, Fritz actually likes black a little bit, as though black's just equalized. Knight takes c6, b takes, but the thing is, after b4, this is a fixed backward pawn on a potentially dangerous c-file, is it not? Bishop c8. White actually opens up the center here with that bishop retreat. The bishop has just taken away its control of e4. White plays e4, not minding a potentially weak d pawn. But first bishop a6 with tempo. And now black takes, so hasn't white got a potentially weak d pawn? Bishop b5, it seems quite nifty defending that c6 pawn. And the bishop seems really potentially okay there, doesn't it? Rook ac1, e6, a3, queen d6, bishop b2, which introduces the idea of rook c5, which is a nice outpost square in front of the backward pawn. But for the moment, the d pawn is attended to. Now rook c5, nice outpost square. And now doubling. It looks as though this is quite well coordinated on c6. Now an interesting probing move, seemingly probing for weaknesses. Queen g5. Is it actually threatening anything? Yes, actually this move does introduce a subtle threat in the position. Can you actually, if I told you, okay, what is white threatening here? For you to get empathy for black's response, because black doesn't want to create weaknesses around his king if he can help it. But what is white actually threatening in this position? Can you see? After queen g5. Right, there's two interesting things I think to point out. But the first thing, white seems to be threatening here bishop takes c6. If black didn't do anything, let's try and give a token move without changing the picture. Bishop takes c6, because we're on the rook actually. Yeah, we're on that rook. There's an overload here on d8. Yeah, that seems to be the threat. But another point of note here is, what about this d pawn? Isn't that being neglected? If bishop takes d4, bishop takes, rook takes, white has here rook takes b5 using this pin, and this is not good because the queen's also supporting b5, so queen takes b5 is winning material there. Yeah, so that would be a bishop up. So yeah, queen g5, unfortunately, it does create some problems for black to solve here. Now, it seems the engine defense is queen d7, not touching the pawns, which can't move backwards, right? So the engine moves are often not touching pawns. Engines keep super solid sometimes. If they do move pawns, it's for very good reason. Now, f5 is also mentioned, actually, though. But queen d7 or f5. And then maybe even taking here is possible because we've shielded this, and this is getting crazy, this line. This represents an exchange sack, and white would still be better there apparently anyway. So okay, so maybe queen g5 is actually, you know, it's a very interesting move, queen g5. It's difficult for black to see what he's doing. So you create some weaknesses. h6 to kick the queen away, queen f4. Now we see queen d7, bishop f3, and here again there's this question about d4. Should we ask that question about d4? Why can't d4 be taken here? Black creates some more weaknesses with g5 potentially. If we take on d4 here, then takes and takes, and then again we've got this pin now against c8. We just play rook takes b5, winning material. Right, so never take on d4. Okay, it seems. So g5, more weaknesses instead. Queen e3, rook c7. And white could actually play h4, it seems, trying to undermine this structure. H4 seems plausible, it seems. For example, like this. Threatening rook takes b5. And this is nice for white. So that's actually plausible here, h4. We see it said queen c3. threatening rook takes b5 now, because there's this like trebling on c7. Rook takes b5 is now threatened. Black defends that rook. Bishop e4. Okay, queen d6. The bishop drops back as if the queen's gonna play queen c2 to go into these light squares potentially. King f8. We see queen c2. King e7. Isn't the king safe here? Rook e1. King f8. Okay, so white needs to try something here if he wants to win this game, and this is an interesting position here. There's a nice liberating move. That's probably a lot of a clue. So white to play here. What would you do? It's actually okay. It's probably technically the strongest move anyway, and it was what was played. So a great move here. What would you play in this position? It seems as though white's pieces are fairly optimal. This bishop here instead of here, you know, the bishop might be useful on this diagonal, but not so useful potentially on this diagonal. So if white's pieces are optimal, what does white want to do? What would you play here with white? If your pieces are optimal, sometimes you want to open up the position. So, okay, intuitively, I mean, you might think d5, and that was what was played. But also trying to get rid of this defensive bishop, right? If nothing else. Black played e5 here, holding on to his bishop. If cd, we take that bishop off, and actually queen h7 check. This is really dangerous for black. In fact, that's like a piece down for black. In any case, no, can't do that. And if e takes, then that's mate in free. Instead of losing the bishop, you just get mated in free instead. Checkmate there, or checkmate here, because the rook's cutting that. So that d5 is pretty nifty. It seems d5, it's so nifty, it's either winning a piece in one line or mating the black king in the other. So ed mates black king, cd loses the bishop. So d5 is a really nifty move. Now if bishop takes b2, then queen takes b2 means things like queen h8 check or queen f6 are dangerous. And for the same reasons, either winning the bishop or mating, for example here, mate, they still occur. So black actually played e5, and now white's got more pressure on c6 though, and he puts even more pressure now, rook c1, so pinning that pawn to c7. Bishop f6, we see queen f5. So a lot of pressure now being put on black, and I don't think black can take here on d5. There'll be a tactic. Black played bishop g7. If he plays this, I originally thought, to be honest, queen c8 takes c8, two rooks, but even better here, we can win this bishop with rook takes c7. The queen's overloaded. This is safe enough to win the bishop there. Okay, so yeah, can't take this pawn. Bishop g7 is played. D takes c6. Now here, this might be more relevant as an idea that if rook takes c6, we can consider queen takes c8 check, getting two rooks. But there might even be stronger here with bishop a2, threatening mate instead. And this position is falling apart for black. So that's too dangerous. Black played instead, well, they're not that greatly far apart. Taking either way is not great. Black played bishop takes c6. And here, white actually intensifies the pin here now with queen c2. There's a nasty pin on c7 with the threat of b5 to just win material, win that bishop. Queen e6. Okay, how does that address b5. b5 wasn't played actually. Queen f5 was played. If b5, it's possible that black plays bishop e4 here. Tactical response to try and win c5. No, so white actually didn't play b5, he played queen f5 now. Ideally, yeah, he'd like the bishop pointing at the rook and just win that bishop. Black plays queen d6. And now putting more pressure on f7, bishop a2. Technically white is winning here, it seems. This is the move played, bishop a2. Technically white is like +3 with queen d3 in this position. Just asking the queen what to do here. Because if takes, then we're left with that almighty pin with b5 on the cards, and also bishop f5, both b5 and bishop f5, or bishop a6. Yeah, this is horrible. And what does black do? What does he do? If something like this, yeah, queen c3. We're getting into a position now where b5 is on the cards there, with the pin is dead for black. But anyway, no. In the game, bishop a2, that's strong as well. It's not as strong. Bishop e8, but it will do. Now here, finally, this idea of 2 rooks for the queen it emerges. Queen takes c8 emerges, getting 2 rooks for the queen. And we've also got a pin piece as well. So f7 is a natural target because it's just a pin piece. It's not really defending f7. Queen d2. And instead of doing something about this bishop, well, the bishop seem they skewered at the moment. White does a fantastically strong move. I've given you a clue. So white to play here. So white to play. What would you play with white in this position? I have given some clues if you were listening carefully. So white to play in this position. How would you solve this position? What would you play in this position? 20 seconds. Any ideas? Nice move. Yeah, the pin piece, the power of the pin piece is illusionary, someone once said. I don't know if it was Tartkower or someone else. Maybe it was Lasker, I don't know. If you know, just tell me. Okay, but rook 1 c7 exploits that. Rook takes f7 is now threatened. But black has nothing better than to play, it seems. If black tries for some checks, it doesn't really help. He could try this. He took here. If he tries this, then check. White plays this, then check. I think the checks are going to run out. The checks run out around here, and it's going to get nasty. So that doesn't help. Black takes on b2. We have check, taking on e8 check, and now bishop d5, crushing move, threatening bishop e4 check to make the black king. Black actually stopped play here. He resigned. You might think, well, can't he just stop bishop e4? I know the bishop's pinned. And also, what about the king walking? So there's a few things to explore here. If the king, okay, black resigned it. If king g6, then rook g8 is scooping up more material. That doesn't help black. He's going to have to give up his queen. It's the bishop down. We've also got this pawn over here. Okay, so forget king g6, and if queen e2 to stop bishop e4, bishop e6 might be simplest for bishop f5, and we reach this position where, okay, well, we can just win the queen here, and if black tries this check, it doesn't really help. Let's check here. King h3. And let's check. The king can go to h4 as long as there's no mating things. Bishop f5 is now on the cards without any further checks. And queen g6, bishop f5, we can win that queen. So it's pretty hopeless. Bishop e6 seems to be the most natural idea to continue the attack. So anyway, black resigned here after bishop d5. Yeah. So that was a nice game, I thought, from Vladimir Kramnik. So d5, so he made all his pieces quite optimal, especially the bishop getting to b1 here instead of the fianchetto position. And then this d5 seemed to open up very advantageously the position, and putting great pressure on that c-file. That c-file seemed to be a disaster area tactically. What was previously a backward pawn turned into a pinning disaster area. Okay. So I hope you got that from that game, at least, and maybe some more points. So let's have a look at another game. In fact, one more. This is the last decisive game of this kind of rapid event. So it's the last game I'm going to show you. So I would have shown you all the decisive games from the rapid event. Okay, so this game is Shirov against Aronian. Aronian playing black. Let's have a look at this game. So e4 from Shirov. This was on the 14th February. So e5. We go into Roy Lopez. And we get the Berlin defense. This knight takes e4 line. Well trodden. And thought to be quite safe for black. Although the king is not castling, black's got the bishop here. So pretty well trodden position. h3 is the most common move, it seems, in the book. Knight h4. Now usually king e8 is played here, it seems, but knight h4 has been played 9 times before, at least. Check. And Shirov avoids knight takes h4 here, which is the most common thing for white to do. Knight takes h4 is the most common. For some reason Shirov, he avoids that. Now he played knight d4 just to show you knight takes h4 theoretically. Games continue like this quite often, it seems, where it's pretty solid for black. Black has in fact swapped some structural issues for, I would say, dynamic solidity. The double pawns don't mean much because he's got the bishop here as well. It makes the black's position pretty solid, tough nut to crack. So that's the most common thing anyway, just to take on h4. But Shirov maybe is like trying to keep more tension in the position. So knight d4 has been seen before a few times, 8 times. Knight g6, f4. We see h5. Knight e4. The knights look great. I mean, it has to be said, the knights look kind of aggressive, but h4, black is fixing down the white pawns here, and there's also interesting resources for black, like rook h5. This f5 square is interesting in this position to try and keep a blockade on f5. Bishop e3, a6, as though c5 without knight b5 is on the cards, potentially as well now. C4. But c5 would always compromise the d5 square, so black doesn't want to do that in a hurry. We see rook h5, so this blockade on f5 is emphasized. Black might also be threatening something intriguing, it seems, in this position. If a casual move here, like a3, can you see what black might be threatening? Well, I think I'm going to show you actually. Knight takes e5. This position, it seems these pieces are a bit loose here. Okay, so this next move kind of addresses the looseness of the bishop, it seems. Rook d3, and it also ticks this other box that, you know, white might, you know, like the doubling of the rooks here. So we see f6 though, biting at white's center. E takes, g takes, and it seems here c5 to kick these knights away. That one in particular is on the cards. Rook f1, bishop d7. There's a little nice symmetry here. If you look at the two knights here and the two bishops here, nice aesthetic coincidence. F5, knight goes to e5, hitting the rook goes to c3. King f7. Yeah, white is potentially wanting to use e6. Anyway, king f7 helps defend e6, and it's pretty safe there. And also it means also this rook can maybe swing to g8 at some point as well. Bishop f4. Now we see rook d8 though. Rook d8 as though c5 and then something like bishop c6. This rook might be useful on the d file at some point. White took on e5 here. F takes. The knight goes back. And it looks scary. This pawn looks like, isn't it weak? We see bishop takes f5. Not worried actually about. Not worried about knight takes e5 check. Instead, knight takes h4 was played. If knight takes e5 check, black has king e6. Remarkably, actually, this is not only safe; it's very good for black. With these two pieces just hanging here. Yeah, that's no good for white at all, it seems. So we see knight takes h4. Bishop takes h4. g4, that's the point. White's going to get his piece back like this. But what happens when the smoke clears here? Is white left with a nice knight on e4? Is black he's got dangerous entry points like d4 here. So white gets his piece back. Rook d4 is used actually. That might be the strongest move, stronger than any check. Checks, I mean, just harmless. Just king goes there. That's not a problem. So rook d4 is played. Okay, looks awkward actually. It is pretty awkward. If rook e3, I think we've got things like bishop g5 for example, or even stronger, just take this. Okay, so we see knight c5. Now rook d2. A rook on the second rank is always is generally pretty dangerous. So black is threatening check and to double the rooks now to get weave a mating net around the king. King h1. Black scoops up a pawn. Here now, this threatens potentially. Well, this check seems useful. Bishop f6 is played to at least stop this f pawn, block the f pawn. Knight e4. Now this accelerates white's demise. Knight e4 actually. It's not too good this position anyway for white. But here black plays a very powerful move. Just rook h4. And it's kind of awkward here for white. If the rook defended, it didn't. If the rook defends like that, well, black can just take here, or even like this to try and put more pressure on. In this position, rook e3 was played, defending like that. Similar consequence, just losing another pawn. It seems white's losing all his pawns and hasn't got any attack to show for it. Apart from the pretty looking knight on e4, yeah, black's just pretty solid here and is just so many pawns up now, isn't he? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's 2 pawns up. Okay, that's defended. Rook c2, trying to win another pawn to be 3 pawns up. Okay, b5, we've got 2 connected pass pawns here. So we're just going to play a5, and it's like 2 connected pass pawns on the way. Rook a3. But as soon as white tries to stop them now black comes in for the kill on the king, using that pawn as a distraction. So rook f4 now, threatening things like bishop h4 is getting really dangerous, because we don't want this position where the rooks are working together like this. But this is happening. This is happening now. After rook takes a6, the rook is out of nowhere, no man's land. After bishop h4, yeah, the rook is having to defend e4 and the first rank. This is very bad for black. For white, this is right. This is very bad for white. We see this check. The king just goes here, and here Shirov resigned. He's overloaded. His rook is actually overloaded. If the rook tries this, he's just dropping the knight. His rooks are also uncoordinated. They're not doing anything in particular. If the rook like goes here, then we get this mate in one. So yeah, white resigned here. That's a good advert for the Berlin defense, this game, unfortunately. In rapid time control, it's really, really solid, and it seems white trying to be adventurous, not taking on h4. It seems black never had any big problems. He had the bishop pair, and it just seemed to be very nice for black all the way through. And that concludes our quick look at the decisive games of the Zurich Chess Challenge. There's no more decisive games to look at. Maybe if there's nothing else on, we can look at the Blitz games. But I think they'll be even more superficial. So I'm not sure about looking at the Blitz games next week. But I hope you got something from these games. I thought they're quite interesting overall. And in the end, Nakamura won the tournaments on the scoring system with his results in both events. He won the event overall, both events. In fact, I read on ChessBase article. If you want to follow the ChessBase articles, they'll give you a bigger context around these events. So ChessBase.com, check the news article for the Zurich Chess Challenge to read all the details. But it seems Nakamura triumphed. Okay, so hope you got something from that. I'm stopping now. Okay, so thanks. Remember to like the video. Likes are really appreciated. Yeah, so likes appreciated. Okay, and have a good week. See you next week. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.